class. So today's topic is techniques in subbing. When you talk about subbing actually means what? Subbing means deputizing, to represent, acting, replacing, deputize, to represent, to act, to replace, substituting. We usually call it substituting again. So when you talk about subbing, you're acting as, there is the editor and you're the sub-editor. So you are deputizing the editor. You are the deputy of the editor. You are the deputy of, you are the representative of the editor. So that is what it means by saying subbing. So today's topic is techniques in subbing. As usual, we start with the introduction. And my introduction says this, that it is paramount, or it is very important, or it is vital to note that not only must the story you are subbing be accurate, not only must the story you are subbing be accurate, clear, readable, and of the right length, it must also be legally safe for print or to print. So that apart from being accurate, apart from being clear, apart from the story being readable, and apart from the story being of the right length, it must be legally safe to print that particular story. We are going to look at what it means when we talk about legally safe. Legally safe. So this topic sheds light on the sub-editor, just like we have said that subbing belongs to the sub-editor. The sub-editor is a representative of the editor. He is an a representative. He is also the person acting on behalf of the editor, or we call him the substitute. So the sub-editor, we are going. The topic sheds light on the sub-editor and the law. Sub-editor and the law, the legal traps. Legal traps. I said we are going to look at what it means by legally safe, because when you talk about legally safe, then we have what we call legal traps that the sub-editor must be aware of. So there are some things that you should be aware of as you are subbing, as you are acting on behalf of the editor, as you are becoming a substitute to the editor. Then you must be able to be aware of some things that are of, some things that may put you into a hot soup. The factors to consider while dealing with contempt of court. I believe you remember what contempt of court is. Contempt of court simply means interfering with the court proceedings and the privileges available to journalists. So they are what we call privileges. As a journalist, there are some things you can write because you have been given some privileges. Another word of privileges is that you have been given freedom to writing on, as compared to maybe some other writers. You have been given some kind of some freedoms to write things, to write stories on some things as opposed to others. So okay, we have said that. We're going to look at factors to consider while dealing with contempt of court and privileges available to you as a journalist. So what are some of the objectives of this topic? I believe and I know that at the end of this topic, you must be able to outline the various reasons why the copy must be legally safe to print. So when you talk about the copy is anything that has not been published. Anything that has not been published on the newspaper is what we call the copy. We don't call them notes. We don't call them writings. We call them the copy. So as a journalist, that is the language. We call it copy. Sometimes we say the copy has been rejected, something like that. So we only talk about the copy. So yes, at the end of this topic, you must be able to outline the various reasons why the copy must be legally safe to print. Why the copy must be legally safe to print. At this topic, the other objective is that you must be able to explain the legal traps that the sub-editor must be aware of while editing news articles. You must be able to list them down, all the legal traps, and explain one by one. Explain one by one, and the reason why the sub-editor must be aware of while editing a news article. Going to look at that. You must also be able to explain the factors to consider while dealing with contempt of court. Remember, we said contempt of court is interfering with court proceeding. You can interfere with the court proceeding in various ways. By number one, failing to appear before the court. If, for example, you have been given a court order to appear before the court and you fail to do it, to obey the court order, again, you can interfere with the court proceeding. For example, if you're taken to court, I mean, you have been given that privilege of covering news within the court, and then some document passes by you, and then you start taking photos without asking for permission from the judge. Also, scandalizing the judge is another thing. Scandalizing the judge simply means that you write ill of a judge who is in charge of a certain proceeding or a certain proceeding. So when you scandalize the judge, that means that the judge has to be demoted or to be removed from that sitting, and another one has to be put, simply because this particular judge is not fit for that particular case. So that is another thing that is interfering with the court proceeding. Other issues may arise, like, for example, failure to bow when the judge arises or is entering the courtroom and you are failing to stand, and failure to bow to show that you respect the court, and so on and so forth. Picking calls on in the court, those are other contempts of court. Now, when you talk about contempt of court, the punishment can vary. You can be asked to pay a fine, or be jailed, or you can be told to pay a fine and be jailed at the same time. So we are going to look at the factors to consider while dealing with the contempt of court. So by the end of this this particular topic, you must be able to explain those factors. And at the end of this topic, the last objective is that you must be able to understand the do's and don'ts of caption writing. You must be able to understand the do's and don'ts of caption writing. Remember, caption is the words that are put when there is a photograph, the words that explain the photograph. At the bottom of the photograph, there are always words that explain what is in the photograph. Those are what we call a caption. So without wasting time, then we go to the real thing. We go to the real teaching. And we can start by saying that not only must the story you are studying be accurate, that one we have already said. Not only must it be what we call, not only should it be readable, not only should it be of the right length, but it must also be legally safe to print. That we have already said. So when you look at production, the production of the newspaper will delay. And these delays usually are caused by late decisions. The delays are caused by late decisions. Who makes the decisions? It is the editor and other galaxy of editors. So we have the editorial department. Let's just say it is the editorial department, because the editor, the chief editor, usually consult with other galaxy of editors before printing what we call a story or the newspaper. So production is delayed. Sometimes you find that the newspaper printing is taking place very late at night. Why? Because there is a decision, or there are decisions that need to be taken into they need to be taken into consideration before doing what? Before printing stories. And sometimes when you look at these decisions, most of the time they are legal decisions that actually can land the newspaper into chaos with the court. These are issues to do with libel and things to do. Yeah, actually libel, because libel is defamation, and this is defamation in writing. So I'm not going to talk about slander, because when it comes to slander will not apply in the newspaper. Slander is spoken libel, or I mean spoken defamation, but libel is the one that applies so much on the newspaper because it is written defamation. So sometimes it is issues to do with defamation in bracket, you're calling it libel, that may make the galaxy of the chief the editors, I mean editors and all of the editorial, stay for a very long time making decisions whether to print or not to print certain news or certain news item. Because you come to realize, if you go ahead and print a story that is libelous or that contains defamation, then you're going to realize, if you are taken to court, you will waste a lot of money. If, for example, you are found guilty of defamation, and you're going to be charged highly. Cases to do with defamations are not cases to play around with. These are cases that actually drains the newspaper or media houses so much. Because you can imagine, like there was a case between this guy called Ali Chirau Mwakwere and versus the Nation newspaper. There was a time the Nation newspaper actually did what we call defamed Chirau Ali Mwakwere. Chirau Ali Mwakwere was, I think, an MP of Mvita, something like that. I stand to be corrected. During those days, the Nation newspaper was approached by Chirau Ali Mwakwere, and it actually admitted that it had defamed Chirau Ali Mwakwere. So it apologized to him. Remember, when you're apologizing, one of the not one of the defenses, but one of the remedies of defamation is that you can apologize. You can offer an apology. Once you offer an apology, it does not just go like that. You offer an apology with an offer. Then go with an offer that we are apologizing to you. And because we are apologizing to you, we know that you have lost so much, and you have been affected by the defamatory statement or statement that we wrote on the newspaper. Therefore, after that, then you tell him, because of that, we are offering you maybe 15 million or 10 million. This person can accept, or if he's not comfortable with the 10 million and the terms of the offer that you have written down, this person may tell you, let us meet in court. So then you meet in court. After meeting in court, the court can now decide. Of course, you as the defendant, for the judge now to see that you are sorry and you knew about it and so much, it's always good to actually tell the judge that actually to present the terms of the offer to the judge, so that in case that he's going to decide that particular case, he can look back at the offer or something like that. So Chirau Ali Mwakwere refused the offer, and so he told the Nation to meet in court. And so the Nation and Chirau Ali Mwakwere met in court, and Chirau Ali Mwakwere won the case, and he was actually compensated with around 20 million. So you can imagine 20 million just going like that. So that's why you will find that these people called the editorial, the editorial department, this is composing of the editors, the sub-editors, and the likes. they may stay for a very long time trying to make decisions on whether to publish a certain story or not. Because if they publish and it turns out to be defamatory, then it means that they are going to lose a lot. So that's how it is. So let's look at what we call the sub-editor and the law. Any question? Michael, any question?
No.
You don't have any question, or you have a question?
Don't have any question.
Okay, then we continue, and we are looking at what we call the sub-editor and the law. So when we talk about the sub-editor and the law, is that you're being told that all newspapers retain and they retain, or they not retaining, not retain. Okay, they retain and they train. They retain and they train lawyers or senior journalists. They have to retain, to train the senior journalist. Versed in the law to read copy, so they have to read the copy and advise the editor. So the lawyers have to do what? The lawyers plus what we call the journalists are together deciding on a certain copy. So the lawyer has to read this particular copy, and he has to advise the editor of the potential legal traps. That as you are reading this particular story, he can actually see if you publish this story, this might happen. And you might find yourself on the wrong side of the law. So they advise the editor of the potential legal traps. If a story is considered unsafe to use, the legal person, after consulting the editor or the chief editor, will issue a legal kill. So when you talk about legal kill, we mean not using a story because the story has negative effect as far as the law is concerned. So that is what we call legal kill. So any legal alteration to make a story safe are passed to the sub or the page editor. So the page editor then does what? The page editor then amends the text. So any story that any alteration that makes a story unsafe or safe are passed to the sub editor who amends the story or who amends the text. With the legal kill, it means that the story must be thrown away or removed from the computer. So in newspaper, we call it legal kill. When it comes to broadcast, we call it kill the story, to kill the story. To kill the story is simply to say, do not publish this, do not broadcast that story. Why? Because that story lacks 1 or 2 or 3 facts. Like, for example, you have been told to go and cover a story. You realize that there is 1 fact remaining. If a story lacks any fact, that story should never be broadcasted. That story should never be published. Why? Because it can land you in a very big legal trap. So we usually kill the story as far as media houses are concerned. So electronic editing also causes no particular problem to legal readers. So the overview of the lawyer or the legal reader should also be called up to ensure that no legal danger has resulted from editing. So you must go back to the editor and tell them, now we have edited the story. Can you now read and tell us whether it is okay? You see, after the last told you, now the story is okay, now you can go ahead and publish the story. Because at the end of the day, this lawyer will be the one presenting you in court in case of defamation. So let's look at what we call the legal traps. Remember, I said at the beginning that we are going to look at the legal traps. So when you talk about legal traps, these are things that can make you find yours. I mean, it can make you, these are things that are legally unsafe, legal traps, legally unsafe things that you should not do. So you should always keep two thoughts in mind when considering legal problems in editing. You should always keep two things or two thoughts in mind when considering legal problems in editing. Number one, a mistake or damaging statement gains much more currency with the public than any other means of dissemination and can cause greater harm. You can bear me witness that when the public are reading newspapers, they only see mistakes. Even when an advert runs on a TV, the people who are watching that particular advert, they see mistakes. They don't see the whole thing. So a mistake or a damaging statement that is written on the newspaper will be more current, or we will add more currency with the public. The public will be able to see it more vividly than any other means of dissemination, than any other thing that you have written there. So if you write the name Uhuru Kenyatta badly, maybe you write maybe Huru Kenyatta without an U, or Hulu with an L, people will see that word more vividly and more clearly than any other thing. You can see Kenyatta. Kenyatta is well written. They will see the mistakes that you have done. So that is the reason why you should always keep two thoughts. Thought number one, mistakes are usually very well seen in the newspaper, and the reader usually concentrates on the mistake much more or mostly than the right dissemination. Number two, newspaper companies are regarded by litigants as rich and good targets. Newspaper companies are regarded by litigants as rich and good targets. So who are litigants? Litigants are what we call accusers, petitioners, complainants, plaintiffs. All these are litigants. So the newspaper companies are regarded by litigants as rich and good targets. So these complainants, they like writing, looking at the newspaper and the mistakes that they have done so that they can take you to court. So two reasons should be in your mind as a sub-editor, that mistakes are usually seen more clearly by the reader than what you have written right. And number two, they are regarded by litigant as rich and good target. So when you see the newspaper, know that lawyers like to read newspaper and buying newspaper so that they can see mistakes where they are coming from. And then they can contact the people so that they can get the business from the mistakes. So those are 2 points that you should always bear in mind as far as legal traps are concerned. And generally, there are only 2 types of laws that affect the newspaper. There are only 2 types, or there are 2 types of laws that affect the newspaper. Number 1, there is what we call the general law of land. General laws of land, to which the editor are liable in the same way as the ordinary citizen. For example, general laws of land are like the contempt of court and trespass. So there are two types of laws that affect the newspaper: the general laws of the land. General laws of the land are those that affect what? The citizen, the ordinary citizens. The ordinary citizens and also the newspaper. For example, the contempt of court and the contempt of court and trespass. Number two, we have laws aimed more specifically at the press. Kuna sheria ambazo tayari zimetengenezwa to only target the press and broadcasting media, to restrict the publicity given to court cases. For example, the law of censorship. We usually have the law of censorship. It is usually and strictly aimed at the press and broadcasting media. So we have two laws that affect what? The newspaper. Number one, the general laws. These are the general laws of land. These are the laws that affect the newspaper and the citizens. Number two, we have laws aimed at specifically for broadcast and the press. For example, when you talk about the law of censorship. So when you look at these laws, they worry the editors so much, since they restrict what a newspaper can say or do. Some are of less immediate concern to the sub-editor. The laws restricting the coverage of court cases, for instance, are accepted and applied by the newspapers. Like there is a law that was passed, I don't know if it is a bylaw or it is a law that was passed, that media houses should always, the parliamentary proceedings should not be covered live. And if you want to watch parliamentary proceedings live, then the media houses should attribute to what we call the KBC, the National Broadcasting. Why? Because these guys called the MPs were so much behaving badly, and you remember some media houses used to show us how MPs are sleeping in the house, etc., how they are misbehaving, etc. So they decided to pass a bylaw by saying that media houses should not be covering live parliamentary proceedings. So that is the law that is affecting what? Broadcasting. It is not affecting the citizen, but it is affecting the press and broadcasting media. So the major legal traps the sub-editor should be worried of are: number one, we have libel and contempt of court. Libel and contempt of court. So legal traps ambazo unafaa kuwa very careful on as a journalist are what we call libel and contempt of court. Libel and contempt of court. So what is libel? I think I explained this, but I'll still explain it. It is defined as defamation in writing or any other visible form. It is defined as defamation in writing or any other visible form. So a newspaper is guilty of libel. A newspaper is guilty of libel when it can be proved that the person's character or livelihood has been damaged as a result of statement made in the paper. So a newspaper is guilty of libel if somebody who has been defamed can be able to prove that his character or livelihood has been damaged as a result of what was written on the newspaper. So a successful action can result in substantial damages. So if, for example, this particular person called the claimant goes to court and he wins the case, then it results to what we call damages. Damages is what is being paid out. So what is paid out, or what the court orders you to pay the person who has been defamed, is what we call damages. So some well-known cases get much publicity, much more are settled down secretly. Remember what I've told you about Chirau Ali Mokwele. Sometimes the media would not want to go to court, because they know when they go to court, they are going to spend so much time. The judge might decide for them to pay. Might tell them to pay, or the court might tell them or might direct them to pay the claimant so much money, like 20 million in the case of Chirau Ali Mokwele. They may decide to do that. So because they don't want that to happen, they may come to you personally so that they settle the matters outside court. If they settle the matters outside court, then there is no need of going to court. So many more are settled down secretly. That is out of court arrangement, in which quite large number of, in which quite large sum of money change hands, accompanied by printed apology. Like there was a story that was going on about Magufuli. I think Citizen, they had said that Magufuli ni mkaidi, ana hataki kufuata sheria za whatever COVID-19, and then they were forced by they were forced to do, I think it went to a point that they were told to do an apology for a whole week. So so many more are settled down secretly out of court. Some that after settling down, they direct the media to do an apology, and so on and so forth.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
If there is rebel, can the person who has been affected, she can ask for a retraction statement by the newspaper,
or a statement that says that we apologize for something like that.
Oh yeah, and you are wrong.
Or what?
Then it's better to print that.
You see, now those ones are arrangements that you make with the paper, with the newspaper industry. You can make an arrangement. So those are your terms. You can tell them, you're going to pay me 20 million, what you are giving me, and I want an apology for the whole week. That's like what Magufuli said, told the Citizen. And they made what we call an apology for a whole week. What we don't know is how they settled the matter. Maybe they paid him, or maybe they didn't pay him. So you can decide to do that. Or maybe you can tell them, I want to just do an apology, a one-day apology, and then you pay me what you're paying me. Something like that.
Okay.
So when you talk about defense for libel, defenses against libel is difficult. They are very difficult. Why are they difficult? Because there is nothing difficult in this world than giving proof. Like, for example, I also teach media law, and for you to prove that you have been defamed, there are some things that you need to prove. Number one, you need to prove that the statements that have been written down actually refers to you. So you can imagine a statement has been written by Nation Media House or Nation newspaper. Then you take that statement and you want to prove that that statement is referring to you. And maybe they have not even mentioned anybody's name. So that's why we are saying defense against libel, they are very difficult, because it is difficult for you, the claimant, because it is going to be difficult for you to prove that the statement belongs that you. Again, an editor might plead the truth of the statement, or contest that they are not defamatory, or that the story was a fair comment. So the editor might say, this story is not defamatory. What we have written is a fair comment, and they prove. So when you talk about fair comment, we mean that that story was made in good faith and without malice, without ulterior motive and without malice. So the editor can also say that the story was all about matter of public interest. So now the defendant will be there doing what? The claimant will be there saying, no, the story was not a matter of public interest. So to win a case of libel is very difficult. It's actually very difficult. While when you talk about the decision of whether or not to publish the news, is the news editors. The sub-editors need to be careful in the arrangement of words and the facts. So you as the editor and the sub-editor, you must be very careful when you're planning on how to arrange your words and so on and so forth. Remember, the reason why I'm saying that the case defense against libel is difficult, these people had already sat down. Before they decide to actually publish that story, they had already sat down with their lawyers. So their lawyers advised them, if you put this story, we are going to defend ourselves that this is a fair comment thing. If that one does not play, something like that. So the lawyer had already advised them. And you there, you are going as an individual to say that you defamed me. It is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult. So they had already planned to publish it, and they had already given what we call a legal advice. They had already been given a legal advice. So that is all about what we call libel. Unless there is a question on libel. So itakuwa ngumu sana kuprove ama kushia hiyo libel, kwa sababu wale ambao wameandika tayari, the journalists, the editors, walikuwa tayari advisiwa na lawyers wao that if you publish this, it's not going to give you any problem. And it happens like this, if the person comes claiming that is defamed, this is the defense that you're going to use. You're going to say that it is a comment, or maybe you're going to say that something that is it is the truth, or maybe it is a public interest story or something like that. And then now will be upon you, the claimant, to prove that it was not a fair comment, to prove that it was not it was not of public interest, and to prove that the words that were said actually belongs to you. So we go to something else, and point B, we are going to what we call the contempt of court. Remember, we said contempt of court refers to interfering with court proceedings, and interfering with court proceedings can be classified into several. You can interfere with court proceedings in various ways. We said, number one, you can interfere with court proceeding if, for example, you are given a court order to appear before the court in a certain proceeding, and then you fail to appear. That is interfering with that particular court proceeding, because that proceeding will not take place. Maybe you are the key person in that particular proceeding. A very good example of contempt of court is you remember when Matiang'i was Matiang'i Boynet were told to appear before the court and answer issues to do with Miguna being mistreated at the airport when he was coming to Kenya. These people did not appear before the court, and the court was there waiting for them to answer some question, or to answer some question. But these people did not appear before the court. And because they didn't appear before the court, that proceeding never took place. They waited for them and they never appeared. It went to an extent of the commission of inquiry being formed to probe the two, that is Boynet and Matiang'i, on why they were not able to get the court to answer to those charges. So contempt of court, number one, we have said, failing to obey the court order. Number two is scandalizing the court. Scandalizing the court, we said, that is speaking ill of a judge that is actually handling that particular court. I mean, that particular case. When you scandalize the judge, it means that that judge is not fit to handle that case, and therefore another judge has to be appointed so that he can handle that particular case. That means you are delaying the case. Number three, it means also, talk about contempt of court. It can be, maybe for example, you're a journalist and some evidence are being passed inside the court, and you decide to take photographs of some evidences that are being passed within the court and publish them on the newspaper. That one is interfering with the court proceeding. Again, another thing is writing a story or writing or concluding on a matter that is concluding on a matter of a case that is still going on in the court of law. Like, for example, you take a story and you publish it and you conclude on it, and the case is still going. It's still open. The case is still open. So once the case is still closed, then you can publish issues about, or you can publish that story, that case on the newspaper, and so on and so forth. So here we are saying that contempt of court means lowering or interfering with the authority of the court. It might include interviewing potential witnesses before they give out their evidence. So if you interview potential witnesses before they give out their evidences, you're actually interfering with the court, with that court proceeding. Or we can talk about scandalizing the court. I've explained about scandalizing the court. And scandalizing the court always means the conduct of the person. This one, when you talk about scandalizing the court, it can be spoken, written words, or printing of pictures, which might impede the working of the court or bring justice into what we call disrepute. So factors to consider when dealing with contempt of court. So what are factors to consider when dealing with contempt of courts? What do you think are factors to consider when dealing with contempt of court, Michael? Already you know what contempt of court is. So what are some of the factors that you should consider? Give me 2 factors. Michael, I am waiting. Factors to consider while dealing with contempt of court.
Whether
I am waiting.
okay.
You're taking longer than I expect. So let's look at the factors to consider while dealing with contempt of court. Number one, you should not use pictures. You should not, or we can put it like this: no pictures should be published of persons accused or expected to be accused of an offense. Why? Until they have been identified in court. So no pictures should always or should be published of persons accused or expected to be accused of an offense until they have been identified in court. For example, when a police officer have issued a picture of an unwanted person, so there is an exception. You can publish the picture if, for example, the police officer have issued the picture of the unwanted person. But if the police officer has not given what is called an issue, then you should not publish a picture of a person accused or expected to be accused of an offense. The next thing, a newspaper must not publish news facts. A newspaper should not publish new facts or evidence about people being tried while the trial is in progress. That there is a trial that is in progress in court. You have found out that there is a new evidence, then you publish the new evidence. You should not do that as a newspaper. So the people charged are not in a position to refute them. So the judge might also be influenced by the report. The next thing, the reason why you should not publish the evidence, you are not helping the court to judge this person. So do not help the court, because if you help the court, then what about the accused? So as a media house or as a paper or as a newspaper, do not publish these new facts or evidence about the people being tried while the trial is in progress. Why? Because the judge might look at the newspaper. So you actually might look at the newspaper and actually decide on the case, even when the person is not guilty about it. Another thing is that a newspaper should not interview any witness or person involved in a trial. A newspaper should not interview any witness or person involved in a trial. For example, printing such an interview can put the newspaper into contempt. Again, criticism of the judge. When you critique the judge or the court proceeding during a trial, is usually considered as contempt of court. So do not criticize the judge. And the last one, a newspaper must not try to get in touch with a member of the jury during a trial. Avoid that. So let's look at privileges, or what we call the defense of legal traps. So we usually have what we call two privileges. Number one, we have qualified privilege and absolute privilege. So we go to qualified privilege. So when you talk about absolute privilege, when you talk about privilege is what we call the honor, the pleasure, the right to. You have been given some kind of freedom to do something, as opposed to maybe another person or as opposed to somebody else. So when you talk about absolute privilege, so we are going to talk about this. Let me put it there. We're talking about absolute privilege. And absolute privilege covers a fair and accurate report on judicial proceedings published contemporaneously. It covers fair and accurate report of judicial proceedings published contemporaneously. Provided that the legal restriction on the coverage in certain cases specified in law have been observed. Then we have qualified privilege. Okay, there are some points that are there on what we call absolute privilege that you need to work on. I mean, that you need to read. There are like 6 points. I know you have so many questions on absolute privilege, but those questions are actually answered there. So when you talk about qualified privilege, this allows protection of reports of judicial proceedings that are non-contemporaneous. So when you talk about contemporaneous means what? Contemporaneous means that they have been published, I mean, contemporaneously, immediately. Non-contemporaneous is not immediate. So this allows protection of report of judicial proceedings that are non-contemporaneous and to report of parliament and other public bodies. Remember, a body like parliament has been given what is called absolute or qualified privilege. That's why you find people in parliament, they can do whatever they can do, but they will never be arrested. I remember Millie Ojiambo talking about in parliament that she can even undress, and that one, she doesn't care. She can undress in parliament. So you can imagine, and why are they not arrested? And we have seen so much drama even in parliament. We have seen Babu Owino having a fight with the Starehe MP, this guy called who? Jaguar. They were having a fight and nothing was being done because it was within parliament. And because they are they have what we call the qualified privilege. So they can do all manner of things within parliament. But once they do them outside parliament, then they can be arrested because it is assumed that whatever they are doing it in a good cause, for a good cause or something like that. So members of parliament in parliament are usually given the qualified privilege. That's why they behave the way they behave. Some sleep, some abuse each other, some they laugh, they pour some. There are so many dramas that happens in parliament and nothing is done about it because they have been given the qualified privilege. So when you talk about qualified privilege, broadly, qualified privilege means that the reports are privileged. Those reports are privileged in law, provided there is no malice or other improper motive behind publication. So whether this motive can be published in court, the protection of qualified privilege is of no avail. So even if you take if you take them to court, the MPs for fighting each other, like this Starehe MP, I hope it is Starehe MP, Jaguar, and Babu Owino, if you take them to court for fighting each other, it will not work because they have been given what? The protection under qualified privilege. So the areas covered by qualified privilege include parliament, even in court. Even in court, courts are covered by what we call qualified privilege. Commonwealth legislatures, international organizations and conferences to which the United Kingdom government sends a representative, so on and so forth, etc. Another places that enjoy what we call qualified privilege is religion. Religion enjoys that. Learning institutions, they enjoy what we call qualified privilege. So if you take me to court because of saying something, I will actually use this as a defense that I enjoy what we call qualified privilege. I can say anything and do anything as far as my class is concerned, and I will defend myself because I've been given what is called qualified privilege. So we also have associations for promoting sports, such as public meetings held for a lawful purpose, etc. Unless there is a question. Unless there is a question. Do I have a question?
You are now. I had a question on this. About getting in touch of the jury. What if you knew that a certain jury had bias in the case? A certain member in the jury
is having a bias on the case.
Yes, it's biased.
It is always good. Okay, now when you talk about scandalizing the judge is simply putting him in a scandal. You are putting him in a scandal so that that case stops. It is always good again. Like I remember there is this case during election petition. Also, you remember election petition. There is this guy called Judge Lenaola. So there was a story that was written about Judge Lenaola, and you know he was seated. The seven judges who were actually looking into the election petition, he was among them. And there was a certain article that was written about Judge Lenaola that it led to him being what we call interdicted. So I think when they were deciding this case, the case about election petition, it went to a point that he was not even there. He was interdicted. He was removed because already his hands were dirty. Once his hands were dirty in such a way that whatever was written about him, he was not fit to decide that particular case. Unless you are saying something that is true. But if you are saying something that is not true, that fire will burn you. I will actually burn you back. Will bounce back to you. So therefore, make sure that if you have realized that a certain judge is biased, then come up with what we call a very nice report with all its evidence. It is not always bad to write something. I mean, it is not always wrong to scandalize the judge, but write the facts to show that that judge is not fit for that particular is not fit to to decide that particular case or to listen to that particular case. So to me, it is bad when you write something malicious about the judge. But when you're writing something positive or something that you know it is true and this person, it is seen and it is factual, then it is okay. Any question?
No other question.
So let's look at something else that we call how when to rewrite. Remember, we usually rewrite what is called news. When do we rewrite news? As a sub-editor, we also said that when you have your lawyers and your lawyers tells you that this story is not good, should not be published, then the story is sent back to the writer to rewrite it again, or to kill it. Remember when we talked about legal kill? So sub-editors are generally thought by reporters to be keen to rewrite copy. So rewriting can be necessary just as heavy editing for reasons that have nothing to do with the way the reporter has written a story. So the treatment of a copy is influenced by the volume of changing value of news. How short or long do you want the story to be? It may also be governed by news development that put the story in different lights. So the inclusion of other copy sources change of emphasis to suit the chief sub-editors. Others might also include clash with editorial policies. So you might be told to rewrite a story because it is clashing with editorial policy. You may also be told to rewrite a story because that story is that story might also be the one putting what we call emphasis to suit. It is putting the story in different lights. Like you have written a story, but when we read that story, it's giving us a dilemma. You see, there are some stories that you read, and then you start asking yourself, do they mean this or do they mean this? So you find that people have translated the story to mean different things. It means different to this one, it means different to the other one, and it means different to the other one. So when you come to realize that a story has got what we call different meanings, you can be told, or you can actually be told to rewrite that particular story again until it has that when a reader reads and another reader reads that particular story, we all get one meaning. So when you have a multi-meaning, a story that has got many meanings, then you might be forced to go and rewrite it until you put it to have one major meaning that you want to communicate. So rewriting or partial rewriting may be used by an editor or a copy for one, angling. Angling means maybe you want to point to a certain angle. There is what we call the news angles. News angles are the various ways that you can write a story. Like for example, when you talk about the issue of coronavirus, you can write a story on coronavirus on various news angles. Like for example, somebody will focus on the people who have died. Another person might focus on the people who have been tested. Another one will focus on the people who have recovered. Another one will focus on maybe China, where it came from. Another person will focus maybe on Kenya. Another one will focus on the young children maybe who have died because of coronavirus. So you see that story has got what we call so many angles. So we may rewrite a story. Maybe, for example, we want to lean on one angle. That is what we call angling. So rewriting a story can be, a story can be rewritten if we want to angle. So when you talk about angling, you're actually saying it simply means deciding on the viewpoint, the perspective to which you want to do what? To write your story on. Another reasons why we rewrite stories when we can rewrite stories is multiple copy sources. So sometimes you will be given a story that has copy from more than one sources. A copy from more than one sources. It might be a story with several ends in which a main section is perhaps by a staff reporter. Another one is maybe another from another reporter, etc., etc. So some stories have foreign ends, which have important links with the main story. For example, let's say, for example, a multiple copy sources can be, say you have been told to go and cover a story about maybe a death that occurred maybe in Kahawa West. So when you, a child that was killed in Kahawa West, you go to Kahawa West and then you find that the child was living with the mother in Kahawa West. They have, and for you to actually get the whole story, you'll have to go to the grandfather, go to the father, go to the, like that. So people have to give you the sources or something like that. So you usually rewrite the story if it has got various sources, so that at the end of the day, the story is suitable to merge. You can be able to merge the report or the report from the various sources together and come up with one whole story.
What if it's a story about Father's Day? It can be from multiple sources. You go interview people, each to say what to say about Father's Day. Then you write your yeah. It can be from multiple sources.
Now when you talk about multiple sources, multiple copy sources, we are looking at a story that cannot end without one source. If one source is missing, then that story will not be published. I don't know that you're getting my point. When you talk about, like, maybe we can say what you want to say, multiple sources, maybe you can have what we call the vox pop, the vox populi. The vox populi is just an interview about Father's Day. And the vox populi is an interview, is a kind of an interview that is usually asked to various people. It's a question that is usually asked to various people. And this question is one question. Like, we can ask you, how do you, tell us about Father's Day. So that question will be asked along Moi Avenue. It will be asked in Kiambu, be asked in maybe, for example, where do you call it? Maybe Ruiru or something like that. But the question is one. But as far as multiple sources are concerned, it is a story that cannot be completed without one source without even leaving one source behind. So if you leave that one source behind, then that means there are some facts that will be missing in that particular story. So that is what we call a multiple copy source. It has got various sources. So you have to listen to this source, listen to this source, look at all the stories that they have given or what they have given you, and then write one complete story. I hope you have understood.
Yes.
Another reason why we may do what we call rewriting the story is when we have a bad copy. So bad copy refers to what? So more obviously, let me just start by saying that bad copy, while rewriting a bad copy, certain things will necessitate the rewriting, which includes explicit obscenities. Maybe there are some obscenities that are there in your writing. You know what you talk when you talk about obscene, something that is obscene. I remember very well when you are my student in media law. We said that obscene is anything that tends to do what to corrupt the mind of a young person. Anything that is obscene. I mean, obscene is anything that does what? That tries to corrupt the minds of a young person. What if the person is corrupt? If the person is corrupt, then you try to do what? Not to corrupt that mind further. So anything that is obscene can be in written form. Anything that is obscene can be in a video form. It can be in a song form. It can be an effigy. It can be a carving. It can be anything. It can even be writings. So that's why we are looking at bad copies, bad copy, and bad copy. It is rewriting which includes explicit obscenities, excessive violence. Remember also violence falls under obscenity. In terms of language, wrong phrasing, grammatical mistakes, wrong, short paragraphs, poor toning, and excessive use of adjectives. Remember today we were looking at the newspaper and we said that adjectives, avoid adjectives so much. Now you see we are talking about excessive use of adjectives. Excessive use of adjectives makes your copy bad. So you have to use adjectives sparingly. Any question on bad copy?
No.
So if there is no question, we go to points to watch. Points to watch. Rewriting. The following question should be answered while you are doing what is called rewriting. First of all, you should ask yourself, is the rewriting necessary? Ask yourself whether the rewriting is necessary. Number two, have you checked quotes? You should ask yourself whether you have checked the quotes, the names, the ages, the addresses against the original copy, because there is the original copy. The original copy is the one that you gathered from the field. The one that the reporter brought is what we call the original copy. So you have to check the quotes, whether they are right or they are okay. Remember, when you misquote somebody, that person can sue you for defamation. He can sue you for misrepresentation. So you have to check whether the quotes are right, whether the names of the individual mentioned in the original copies are written okay in the final copy, and whether the ages and the addresses are okay, etc. The other question you should ask yourself, have you followed the house style, spelling, abbreviation, etc.? Remember, every newspaper has got its own house style. That's why you can see the difference between Nation and the Standard, because they are using what is called different house styles. So the first thing that you do in a media house during induction is to learn the house style, because you might end up writing the story in the wrong house style, and that story will end up being done what? Rejected. And rejected means that you go back and rewrite that particular story. So let's look at caption writing. Caption writing. So writing pictures caption is a job that usually falls on the page editor or the sub-editor. So we say that a caption is a text that has been typed below the picture or besides a picture, whose main purpose is to do what? Whose main purpose is to describe that particular picture. So while a picture cannot stand without them, the wording should not stress the obvious. Like for example, you have a picture maybe of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga having a handshake. Then you start telling us from the left is Raila Odinga, and the next is Uhuru Kenyatta, the president of Kenya. Maybe you start by saying from the left, Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, ODM opposition leader, and on the right is Uhuru Kenyatta, the president of Kenya, the president of the Republic of Kenya. You see, you are stating the obvious. When we see those pictures, even without writing something like that, we know this is the president and this one is an opposition leader. So avoid stressing the obvious. If you stress the obvious, we will take you back to rewriting it. So a caption should also try to extend what the picture is saying by offering what we call an exemption and putting the picture into the context. For example, a caption to a picture of a man playing golf wouldn't communicate enough if it has the following. Tiger Woods playing a long shot. It does not communicate much. When you have a caption like this, Tiger Woods playing a long shot. But it would be better if you put it like this, Tiger Woods playing golf. You see, when you talk about a long shot, even in journalism, we have what we call a long shot. Ndio, nani Michael? In journalism, photography, we have long shot. We usually have long shot. So if you say Tiger Woods playing a long shot, then it is becoming what is called, it doesn't sound well. But if you are to put it like this, Tiger Woods playing golf, it is better. So all pictures in a newspaper need to have captions, including pictures on television program, page, etc., etc. So do not leave pictures in the newspaper hanging without captions. So what are the do's and don'ts of caption writing? So many do's and don'ts of caption writing. So number one, try to use present tense. Remember, when you write present tense, before we started this particular topic, or is it in the newspaper, we said that when you use present tense, it makes that news fresh. If you use past tense, it makes that news, the opposite of fresh is, it doesn't sound right. So that is number one, try to use present tense when you're writing caption. Number two, try to replace the caption adjacent to the picture. No, try to place the caption close to the picture. Don't put it down. You give a lot of space that the picture is here and the caption is down there. No, the picture and the caption should be so close to each other. Most likely put it under it. When you put your caption very far from the picture, then you come to realize that people will look for that particular caption. So when you see people looking for the caption, just know that you have already failed. People should not struggle looking for caption, for your picture's caption. Again, try to avoid having composite caption. that cover a number of pictures. For example, directions such as below, left, bottom, right, above, center can confuse the reader. You are saying this at the right corner or at the bottom right, above, there is, you see, you confuse the readers. You will confuse the reader. So avoid such words. Try to avoid having composite caption. Try to avoid having composite caption that cover a number of pictures. The next point, do not repeat the wording of the headline or introduction in the caption. Whatever is in the headline, avoid using it in the caption. Unless there is a question, I will stop there.
Like a general question. There was this instance where I wrote an article for an editor, and the editor rewrote that article. So, and the article was still in my name. So people asked me questions at the audience, and I wondered how to respond because the editor changed parts of what I had written.
Can you repeat again?
Okay, I had written an article.
Yes.
For an editor. And so the editor rewrote that article.
Was it published in the newspaper?
It was published in Zetec. And so the audience asked me questions about that article, and now I wondered how to answer them. I wondered a lot because it had been rewritten, my previous version.
So the question was,
how do you answer the questions to the audience?
You see, it is going to be difficult if, for example, the editor had rewritten the story and you know, there is what we call the angles, the news angle. If he had focused on a particular angle and maybe your angle was different, then it's going to be difficult to answer the audience. Did he change the angle?
Yes, we kind of changed the angle.
If he changed the angle, then it would have been very difficult for you even to answer the audience because, number one, he changed the angle. He changed the angle. And changing the angle of the newspaper, the editor should not change the angle of the newspaper. The only person who can change the angle of the newspaper is the writer. It's supposed to be taken back to you, and the editor is supposed to tell you, now I want you to focus on this particular angle. So that when you write, even if you meet the audiences, you can be able to explain to them. But at this point, the editor just took it upon himself to change the angle of that news. Again, he should not have changed the angle of the news. He should have said, he should have added more to what you had already said, so that in case you meet the audience, it would have been easier for you to explain. It would have been easier for you to explain, since the editor did not interfere so much with what you had written. He only added or deducted. I mean, he only added or removed some wordings from your article. I think that one was not right again.
Okay.
Yes, so I will stop there. You have 1 hour. Did you finish the other one, the assignment?
Yes.
Last time I had not finished. You had not submitted.
I have submitted.
Now I am giving another one immediately.
Yes.
I am opening. If you refresh your page, you will see an assignment there, and you will see a video again. You will see a video. Refresh your page. You will see a link to a YouTube video on stabbing, and then you will see an assignment. Assignment 1. Have you seen it? Confirm. Okay. I've already opened. Confirm and tell me whether you have seen it. It's a very easy assignment. You watch that particular video there. After watching that particular video, you summarize what we call you summarize the importance. Is it the importance? The 10 tips of subbing. 10 tips of subbing.
Yes, I've seen it.
And now you can do that. I've given you at least 1 hour to do the assignment. Then you can do it properly. Concentrate on it. You concentrate on that particular assignment very well, so that again you can earn good marks. You know, you know the one major goal of a lecturer is to make sure that his student passes. It's not to fail a student.
Yes.
So concentrate on the assignment. Take your time. You have a whole hour. So that particular video is going to take, is it 20 minutes or around 20 minutes? And then you answer to that question. Anyway, if you have any question, this page, particular big blue button will remain open. I will stop there for today.
Okay, good.
You too.
You are currently the only person in this conference.